Welcome to A Reason to Talk with Chris Reason. This episode, I'm back talking about serial killers. Once again, I haven't done an episode of one of these in a long time. Today, Ed Gein, the Mad Butcher of Wisconsin. Let's get into it. This is A Reason to Talk with Chris Reason. Before we get into today's episode, check out our online store, ebay.com/str/Chris Reason Network. That's ebay.com/str/Chris Reason Network for awesome items from video games to movies and more. Get amazing deals at ebay.com/str/Chris Reason Network. Help promote the podcast and the channel and a whole bunch more. Let's keep on doing this. Edward Theodore Gein, also known as the Butcher of Plainfield or the Plainfield Ghoul, was an American murderer, suspected serial killer, and a body snatcher. Gein's crimes committed around his hometown of Plainfield, Wisconsin, gathered widespread notoriety in 1957 after authorities discovered that he had exhumed corpses from local graveyards and fashioned keepsakes from their bones and skin. He also confessed to killing two women, a tavern owner Mary Hogan in 1954 and a hardware store owner Bernice Warden in 1957. Gein was initially found unfit to stand trial and confined to a mental health facility. By 1968, he was judged competent to stand trial. He was found guilty of the murder of Warden, but he was found legally insane and was remanded to a psychiatric institution. You can't talk anymore. Gein died at Mendota Mental Health Institute from respiratory failure resulting from lung cancer on July 26, 1984, age 77. He is buried next to his family in the Plainfield Cemetery in a now unmarked grave. It's kind of funny that they unmarked it, which makes sense though. Edward Theodore Gein was born in La Crosse, Wisconsin, August 27, 1906, the second of two sons of George Philip Gein and Augusta, I'm going to butcher this, Wellmine Gein. Gein had an elder brother named Henry. Augusta, who was fervently religious and nominally Lutheran, frequently preached to her sons about the innate immortality of the world, the evil of drinking, and her belief that all women were naturally promiscuous and instruments of the devil. She reserved time every afternoon to read to them from the Bible, usually selecting verses from the Old Testament and the book of Revelation concerning death, murder, and divine retribution. Gein idolized and became obsessed with her. So that's probably where all this shit fucking started, right there. Holy balls. Augusta hated her husband, an alcoholic who was unable to keep a job. He had worked at various times as a carpenter, a tanner, and an insurance salesman. During his time in La Crosse, Gein's father owned a local grocery shop, but he soon sold the business and left the city with his family to live in isolation on a 155-acre farm in the town of Plainfield, Wisconsin, which became their permanent residence. Augusta took advantage of the farm's isolation by turning away outsiders who could have influenced her sons. Gein left the farm only to attend school. Outside of school, he spent most of his time doing chores on the farm. Gein was shy, and classmates and teachers remembered him as having strange mannerisms, such as seemingly random laughter, as if he were laughing at his own personal jokes. To make matters worse, Augusta punished him whenever he tried to make friends. Despite his poor social development, Gein did fairly well in school, particularly in reading. That's Augusta's, I can tell right now, is the main issue of Gein being a fucking social not a lunatic, but poor social development, and also not letting him do shit or even become friends, and punish him for trying to get friends. Like, holy balls. On April 1st, 1940, Gein's father died of heart failure at age 66. Ed and his brother Henry began doing odd jobs around town to help cover living expenses. The brothers were generally considered reliable and honest by the rest of the community. While both worked as handymen, Ed also frequently babysat for neighbors. He enjoyed babysitting, seeming to relate more easily to children than adults. Henry began dating a divorced mother of two and planned to move in with her. He worried about his brother's attachment to their mother and often spoke ill of her around Ed, who responded with shock and hurt. May 16th, 1944, Ed was burning away marsh vegetation on the property. The fire got out of control, drawing the attention of the local fire department. By the end of the day, the fire having been extinguished and the firefighters gone, Ed reported his brother missing. With lanterns and flashlights, a search party searched for 43-year-old Henry, whose dead body was found lying face down. Apparently, he had been dead for some time, and it appeared that the cause of death was heart failure since he had not been burned or injured otherwise. It was later reported by biographer Harold Schechter that Henry had bruises on his head. Police dismissed the possibility of foul play, and the county coroner later officially listed asphyxiation as the cause of death. The authorities accepted the accident theory, but no official investigation was conducted, and an autopsy was not performed. Questioning Gein about the death of Bernice Worden in 1957, state investigator Joe Willemsky, close enough, brought up questions about Henry's death. George Arndt, who studied the case, wrote that in retrospect, it was possible and likely that Henry's death was the Cain and Abel aspect of this case, which would make fucking sense. With Henry deceased, Ed and Augusta were now alone. Augusta had a paralyzing stroke shortly after Henry's death, and Ed devoted himself to taking care of her. Sometime in 1945, he later recounted that he and his mother visited a man named Smith who lived nearby to purchase straw. According to Ed, Augusta witnessed Smith beating a dog. A woman inside the Smith residence came outside and yelled for him to stop, but Smith beat the dog to death. Augusta was extremely upset by the scene. However, what bothered her did not appear to be the brutality toward the dog, but rather the presence of the woman. Fucking A. Jesus. Augusta told Ed that the woman was not married to Smith, so had no business being there, and angrily called her Smith's harlot. She had a second stroke soon after, and her health deteriorated rapidly. Augusta died December 29, 1945, at the age of 67. Ed was devastated by her death. In the words of Schechter, he had lost his only friend and one true love, and he was absolutely alone in the world, which 100% true. Gein held on to the farm and earned money from odd jobs. He boarded up rooms used by his mother, including the upstairs, downstairs parlor, and living room, leaving them untouched, while the rest of the house became increasingly squalid. These rooms remained pristine. Gein lived thereafter in a small room next to the kitchen. Around this time, he became interested in reading pulp magazines and adventure stories, particularly those involving cannibals or Nazi atrocities. Specifically concerning Isle Koch, I'm butchering this, who selected tattooed prisoners or for death in order to fashion lampshades and other items from their skins. Jesus Christ. Gein received a farm subsidy from the federal government starting in 1951. He occasionally worked for the local municipal road crew and crop threshing crews in the Plainfield area. Sometime between 1946 and 1956, he also sold an 80-acre parcel of land that Henry had owned. Alright, now let's get into his fucking crimes. On the morning of November 16th, 1957, 58-year-old Plainfield hardware store owner Bernice Worden disappeared. The hardware store's truck was seen driving out from the rear of the building at around 9:30 a.m. The hardware store saw few customers that entered that day. Saw a few customers the entire day. Some area residents believe that this was because of the deer hunting season. Warden's son, Deputy Sheriff Frank Worden, entered the store around 5 p.m. to find the cash register open and bloodstains on the floor. Frank Worden told investigators that on the evening before his mother's disappearance, Gein had been in the store and was to have returned the next morning for a gallon of antifreeze. A sales slip for the antifreeze was the last receipt written by Worden on the morning that she disappeared that evening. That evening, Gein was arrested at a West Plainfield grocery store, and I'm going to butcher this too, and I live out here in Wisconsin. Waushara County Sheriff's Department searched the Gein farm. Sheriff's deputy discovered Warden's decapitated body in a shed on Gein's property, hung upside down by her legs, with a crossbar at her ankles and ropes at her wrists. The torso was dressed out like a deer. She had been shot with a .22 caliber rifle, and the mutilations were made after the death. Searching the house, authorities found a huge list of shit. Ready? A whole human bones and fragments, a wastebasket made of human skin covering several chairs, skulls on his bedpost, female skulls, some with the tops sawn off, bowls made from human skulls, a corset made from a female torso skin from shoulders to waist, leggings made from human leg skin, masks made from skin or female heads, Mary Hogan's face mask in a paper bag, Mary Hogan's skull in a box, Bernice Warden's entire head in a burlap sack, Bernice Warden's heart in a plastic bag in front of Gein's potbelly stove, 9 vulvae in a shoebox. I don't know what the hell that is. A young girl's dress, and the vulvas of two females judged to have been about 15 years old. A belt made from female human nipples. What the fuck? 4 noses, a pair of lips on a window shade drawstring, a lampshade made from the skin of a human face, fingernails from female fingers, and female human nipple doorbell. Holy shit. These artifacts were photographed at the State Crime Laboratory and then decently disposed of. When questioned, Gein told investigators that between 1947 and 1952 he had made as many as 40 nocturnal visits to 3 local graveyards to exhume recently buried bodies while he was in this dazed-like state. And in about 30 of those visits, he said that he came out of the daze while in the cemetery, left the grave in good order, and returned home empty-handed. On the other occasions, he dug up the graves of recently buried middle-aged women he thought resembled his mother, and took the bodies home, where he tanned their skins and make his paraphernalia. Gein admitted to stealing from 9 graves and led investigators to their locations. Alan Wilewski of the State Crime Laboratory participated in opening 3 test graves identified by Gein. The caskets were inside wooden boxes. The top boards ran crossways, not lengthwise. The tops of the boxes were about 2 feet below the surface in sandy soil. Gein had robbed the graves soon after the funerals while the graves were not completed. The test graves were exhumed because authorities were uncertain as to whether the slight Gein was capable of single-handedly digging up a grave during a single evening. They were found as Gein described. 1 casket was empty, another casket contained Gein's crowbar, and the final casket saw most of the body missing. Yet Gein had returned rings and some body parts. Thus Gein's confession was largely corroborated. Soon as his mother's death, Gein began to create a woman's suit so that he could become his mother, to literally crawl into her skin. He denied having sex with the bodies he exhumed, explaining they smelled too bad. During State Crime Laboratory interrogation, Gein also admitted to shooting 51-year-old Mary Hogan, a tavern owner missing since December 8, 1954, whose head was found in his house, but he later denied memory of details of her death. A 16-year-old youth whose parents were friends of Gein and who attended baseball games and movies with him reported that Gein kept shrunken heads in his house, which he had described as relics sent by a cousin who had served in the Philippines during World War II. Upon investigation by the police, these were determined to be human facial skins carefully peeled from corpses and used by Gein as masks. During questioning, Sheriff Art Shelley reported assaulted Gein by banging his head and face into a brick wall. As a result, Gein's initial confession was ruled inadmissible. Shelley, died of a heart failure in 1968 at age 43. Before Gein's trial, many who knew Shelley said he was traumatized by the horror of Gein's crimes, and this, along with the fear of having to testify, especially about assaulting Gein, caused his death. Alright, so some suspected crimes. In addition to the murders of Hogan and Warden, Gein was also considered a suspect in several other unsolved cases in Wisconsin. In November 1957, authorities confronted Gein with a list of missing persons cases that had occurred between the death of his mother and Warden. Their suspicions were further aroused after the discovery of Hogan's remains. However, lie detector tests seemingly exonerated Gein of any other murders, and his psychiatrists concluded that his violence was only directed to women who physically resembled his mother. Georgia Jean Weckler, age 8, disappeared near her farm home in Fort Atkinson at approximately 3:30 p.m. on May 1st, 1947. She was given a lift home from a grade school in Jefferson by a neighbor who dropped Weckler off at the lane that led from the U.S. Highway 12 to the Weckler farm. Weckler was last seen pausing to open the family mailbox and removing a stack of mail. She was never seen again. Witnesses reported seeing a dark-colored, possibly black, 1936 Ford sedan with a gray plastic spotlight in the vicinity that afternoon. Gein owned a black 1937 Ford. Evelyn Grace Hartley, age 15, went missing while babysitting a 20-month-old girl at the home of La Crosse State College professor Viggo Rasmussen on the evening of October 24th, 1953 in La Crosse. That evening, her father, Richard, called the Rasmussen house several times after she failed to check in as planned at 8:30 p.m. He received no answer. Concerned, he drove to the Rasmussen house to find the doors were locked, the lights and radio on, and items scattered all over the house. The living room furniture had been moved around in different places, as were Evelyn's school books. Richard found her shoes in different rooms, one shoe upstairs, one downstairs. He also found his daughter's broken glasses upstairs. Richard did not find Evelyn in the house. After his arrest, Gein was questioned regarding Evelyn's disappearance. However, he denied involvement in the disappearance and passed two lie detector tests. Police found no trace of Evelyn's remains during a search of Gein's property. Victor Harold Travis, age 43, a resident of Adams County, went off to hunt deer in the company of 43-year-old acquaintance Raymond Burgess, resident of Milwaukee, on November 1st, 1952. In the late afternoon, the pair stopped for refreshments at Mac's Bar in Plainfield for several hours. At around 7 p.m., they both left the bar, got into Berg's car, and drove away. The hunters, along with the car Burgess was driving, was never seen again, and no trace of them was ever found. Travis and Burgess had been hunting on the farm next to Gein's despite his objections on the day of their disappearance. In addition, Gein has also been tentatively linked to the June 1954 disappearance of neighbor James Walsh, age 32. Walsh and his wife lived near Gein, who performed chores for her after her husband went missing. Gein was also investigated for potential involvement in the August 1956 disappearance of Irene Keaton, age 30, who was last seen in Plainfield, and in the attempted abduction of Judy Rodenkal, age 16, from Auroraville. On November 21st, 1957, Gein was arraigned on one count of first-degree murder in Waushara County Court, where he pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity. He was diagnosed with schizophrenia and found mentally incompetent, thus unfit for trial. He was then sent to the Central State Hospital for the Criminally Insane, now the Dodge Correctional Institution, a maximum security facility in Waupun, and later transferred to the Mendota State Hospital in Madison. 1968, doctors determined Gein was mentally able to confer with counsel and participate in his defense. The trial began on November 7, 1968, and lasted 1 week. A psychiatrist test that Gein had told him that he did not know whether the killing of Warden was intentional or accidental. Gein had told him that while examined a gun in Warden's store, the weapon discharged and killed Warden. He said he had not aimed the rifle at Warden and did not remember anything else that happened that morning. At the request of the defense, Gein's trial was held without a jury, with Judge Robert H. Gallmer proceeding. Gein was found guilty by Gallmer on November 14th. A second trial dealt with Gein's sanity. After testimony by doctors for the prosecution and defense, Gallmer ruled Gein not guilty by reason of insanity and ordered him committed to Central State Hospital for the criminally insane. Gein spent the rest of his life in a mental hospital. Judge Gallmer wrote, due to prohibitive costs, Gein was tried for only one murder, that of Mrs. Warden. He also admitted to killing Mary Hogan. Gein's house, a 195-acre property, were appraised at $4,700, equivalent to like $50,000 in 2023. His possessions were scheduled to be auctioned on March 30th, 1958, amidst rumors that the house and the land it stood on might become a tourist attraction. Earlier on the morning of March 20th, the house was destroyed by fire. A deputy fire marshal reported that a garbage fire had been set 75 feet from the house by a cleaning crew who was given the task of disposing of refuse. That hot coals were recovered from the spot of the bonfire, but the fire did not spread along the ground from the location of the house. Arson was suspected, but the cause of the fire was never officially determined. It is possible that the fire was not considered a matter of urgency by Fire Chief Frank Warden, son of Gein's victim Bernice Warden. When Gein learned of the incident while in detention, he shrugged and said, "Just as well." Gein's Ford sedan, which he used to haul the bodies of his victims, was sold at public auction for $760, equivalent to $8,000 in 2023. To carnival sideshow operator Bunny Gibbons. Gibbons charged carnival goers 25 cents admissions to see the damn thing. Oh, God, fucking 25 cents. God, that's like nothing today. Gein died at the Mendota Mental Health Institute due to respiratory failure secondary to lung cancer on July 26, 1984, at the age of 77. Over the years, souvenir seekers chipped pieces from his gravestone at the Plainfield Cemetery until the stone itself was stolen in 2000. It was recovered in June 2001 near Seattle, Washington, and was placed in storage at the Washoe County Sheriff's Department. The gravesite itself is now unmarked, but not unknown. Gein is interred between his parents and brother in the cemetery. That is a lot of fucking shit for fucking Ed Gein wearing face masks of women that resembled his mother. Tried doing making a whole fucking skin suit so he could wear to pretend to be his mother. Jesus. For more episodes like this, hit that follow button. Thank you for joining me on today's episode of Reason to Talk with Chris Reason. Please make sure to check out our online store at ebay.com/str/Chris Reason Network. Hit that subscribe button and a notification bell if you're listening to us on YouTube. Otherwise, hit that follow button wherever else you get your podcasts from. Stay tuned for more reviews, topics on serial killers, conspiracy theories, and much, much more. Peace and bacon grease, guys.